This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by Isotope, Native Instruments, Atom Audio, and SAE Institute. You're hearing my voice right now mixed through Isotope, Ozone, and Velvet on Atom Audio monitors and headphones. Make sure to get my free mixing course at mixmasterbundle.com, and please check out our awesome sponsors using the links in the show notes. And please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel because it's a great way to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
And I think it's every production room. Everybody's got their tools. Even if you're in the box, you know, you've collected your virtual instruments. Everyone who's ever got the new Serum or the new Omnisphere or whatever, you spend your afternoon. You go through your presets. You mark your favorites. You try to kind of get ready to understand, to have a toolkit and a palette ready for when the artist is in the room and you're looking for Hollywood strings or you're looking for, a sine wave lead synth. You can get there quickly. I think a lot of people wonder if I'm a gear collector. And it's not real. I don't collect gear. This is not a collection. It's all deployed.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lij Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Dreaming of a career in audio or the entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs where you'll learn on professional-grade gear with industry pros, learning through real projects, not just lectures. Explore studio production, live sound, audio for film, and a whole lot more. Or take the entertainment business program to learn about contracts, promotion, and more. With diploma, associate, and bachelor's programs, there's a path for you. Book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. Howdy Rockstars, it's your host Lij Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is David Kalmusky, a multi-diamond producer, songwriter, guitarist, mixer, and engineer. His credits include Joss Stone, Shawn Mendes, Carrie Underwood, John Legend, Keith Urban, Mickey Guyton, Motley Crue, Nate Smith, Warren Ziders, Parmalee, Rita Wilson, Kay Michelle, and many, many more. By 2025, his catalog has amassed over 40 billion streams. David's also been a guest on the podcast previously for episodes RSR516 and 371. So I actually want to give a big shout out also to our mutual friend, Glenn Rosenstein, for originally making our introduction over a decade ago. So please welcome back David Kalmusky to Recording Studio Rockstars. David, my man, are you ready to rock, dude?
I'm ready to rock, Lij.
Dude, it's great to have you here on the show, man. What's really amazing too is, you know, we've known each other for quite a while, and we've done a couple of podcast episodes previously, but we've never done one on video like this. And this is the first time we get to see it.
Yeah.
And it's a new location for you.
It is. Yeah, we if anyone, listened to our previous podcasts over the years, we had a wonderful multi-room, more of a traditional old school tracking facility in Berry Hill for many, many years. And we sold the real estate during COVID and kind of decided to retool the narrative of music production and sort of still old school, sitting at a console.
Yeah.
But the console's got Ableton rig and a drum kit and a dozen synthesizers and 60 guitars in the room with amps and everything.
Yeah, Rockstars, you can probably see in the back of my shot. We've got this great setup in the control room now where you can see the stuff behind Dave and me.
I started to envision my ideal. I built my dream studio, and for a decade and a half, made a lot of amazing traditional records. But as music production started to go, for me, more into collaboration, writing, producing in the room, being a multi-instrumentalist, producing multi-instrumentalist artists, being in a studio where there's a piano in a piano room, and if we wanted to work on the piano, it was all, the drum kit was out on a big tracking room floor. My guitar rig was in Studio B. My Contact, Ableton, my entire sort of workspace on a laptop moving from room to room, the whole time I was sort of envisioning what would my dream production room look and feel like,
Yeah.
and you're sitting in it. We moved down to Music Row, and took over the historic Masterphonics building. We're in a beautiful Tom Hidley mix room, with all my mix stuff. I'm still mixing records in here, but I've got my favorite set of Craviatos in a room, with 60 of my favorite guitars and a dozen of my favorite synths and
What was the
vintage
thing
synths
you
and
mentioned?
keyboards.
Your Craviatos?
Yeah,
What are those?
Craviato drums right behind you.
Oh, I don't know anything about those. Tell us about your drum kit there.
They're made in Nashville now, Johnny Craviato. Those are, our dear friend Chad Cromwell. Shout
Yeah.
out to Chad.
Yeah.
It has been a major artist and brand ambassador for those drums for many, many years. So I've recorded him consistently. I don't know. I've done 1,000 recordings with Chad, and I've also recorded a lot of other great drummers. And everybody sounds great on their drums, but there's something inherently about how these drums actually sound,
Yeah.
even when I'm playing them.
Are
which
those usually what he would play on a session? as
Yeah,
well?
he'd roll in, and Chad's got, a vintage Rogers kit, and he's a great session player. So there's lots of records we've done on my old vintage Ludwig kit as well, too. But something about these drums, recording them, you just put any microphone anywhere near them, and it makes you like a genius engineer. And
Yeah.
you don't get in the way and you don't mess it up. I'm hanging like an old PB90 right in the middle of the kit. And sometimes that's the only mic on the entire record. And the balance is so perfect. And the bottom end and there aren't woofy overtones and really weird resonances. It's just such a great drum kit.
What's the PB90?
The PB90 predates the RCA44.
Wow.
So that's from people are going to fact check me. So
Right.
I'm guessing, and people can correct me, that the PB90 was from about 1938 to about 47 in production, and
it looks like a RCA 44.
it
big
looks
ribbon mic.
very, very similar. It's a different microphone than a 44. It's got a lot of mid-range, like mid-range, that feels a little bit more open, I think, than a 44. Probably less bottom end than a 44, and it makes it pretty controllable. And I've used it on vocals, for a real classic vocal sound. We'll put it up, and if you've got a belty singer that's singing something nostalgic, sort of era specific, it's a sweetheart of a microphone.
Yeah.
But I love it as a mono blend. We'll just kind of move it around. We'll have a drummer play, and I'll have an engineer out on the floor. We'll just kind of move it around, and it picks up the kick and the toms. The null spots are hilarious, on a lot of the old ribbon mics. You can literally walk up to the side of it and speak, and nobody can hear you.
Yeah.
It's just hear nothing. So it nulls on a traditional sort of one up, one down kit like this with one ride and one crash. Put the cymbals in the null spot. It's magic.
That's awesome.
It really is just like a perfect cancellation of the cymbals, and it just gets everything else.
We were talking about that recently on a podcast too, about, using figure eights and to get clever with rejecting certain drums, because a drum kit getting recorded for that is pretty tight.
Yeah,
real
it's
estate.
tricky. Cymbals and hi-hats are going to end up everywhere except for that mic.
Yeah, that's cool, man. So then, Rockstars, you can't quite see it, but off to our side here too, there is a grand piano in the control room, which is a really cool thing, And so, to your point, now it's so much quicker to make music. It's almost like, do you feel like you're going back to, the kind of writer studio space?
Absolutely.
Maybe your roots.
When I started in the business, a really, really long time ago, it started out in, with a 4-track in your room with all your stuff. Like, you didn't find collaborators on a regular basis that were paying you money to make their records. And somewhere along the way, I started building studios and always having a really big, massive sort of tracking facility. I had one early in Canada that I partnered with Jay Reel and some friends in my hometown, and that was our home base, and it felt like, we were hosting the making of albums, but I wasn't a writer and I wasn't always the producer. Sometimes I was an engineer or a guitar player in the band. And as that evolved in Nashville, for me over a decade and a half, um, the getting invited to collaborate and write and play a multi instruments on um, collaborations with a lot of other musicians, I always ended up moving into smaller little production room spaces to do a lot of the pre-production, then a lot of the overdubs and post-production, and wanted to marry the whole process
Yeah.
and just didn't have the layout. We didn't build that studio in Berry Hill to be that. We built it, 14 perfectly isolated rooms on their own concrete pads that didn't, transfer any uh, vibrations between the rooms. Everything's so soundproofed that its great purpose in life was to host the tracking date,
Right.
which was a traditional tracking session. And I found more and more I'd spend, 20 days a month trying to build out tracks, trying to write songs, trying to overdub, singing all the vocals, singing the background vocals, and mixing the record. And then, 5 or 10 days, we'd have the catering and the band and everybody over. In this environment, I just happen to live in a city with the greatest tracking rooms in the world. I can go to Ocean Way or Blackbird or Sound Emporium. I'm actually loving being, the producer tourist again that I was when I came to town. But, I didn't set this room up to make records in this room, but it's turned out so well that we've actually made a few.
Yeah.
We were in a snowstorm. I was working with John Oates and the band Lawrence in New York City at the Hit Factory 3 weeks ago.
That's one of your new projects.
When that snowstorm was blowing in, and then Karen Kasowski, our dear friend who has been on your podcast, had booked us with Mickey Guyton to record a track for the Ringo Starr thing that was happening at the Ryman, and there was this snowstorm blowing in, and we had a studio booked for the Friday, but the snowstorm was blowing in on Friday, and she was like, is there any way we can move this session to the Thursday? So I, grabbed the earliest flight I could, came back, and we did a full band, full tracking date in this room on headphones, which this room wasn't designed for. And it turned out so well that we're actually tracking a record next week with Chad Cromwell and our friend Anders Osborne's coming to town. And
oh, cool, man.
This has turned out to be like a little clubhouse. Like it's actually really, really cool. I didn't really intend for it to be that. It's more for me when I'm writing a song and we want to build a track and it needs some real drums. I can just jump over to the kit and unmute some faders and put a analog beat down, or I can wheel my Ableton rig over and program something all within 15 seconds of thinking about it. If I'm with an artist, which I work with lots of great piano player artists, there's mics on the grand piano. It's already, this whole room is mic'd up and interfaced, and it's all completely ready to go. Everything, every synthesizer in the room, there's 15 guitar amps. There's, like I said, 60 amazing classic guitars, acoustic basses, mandocellos, electric guitars, vintage synthesizers. There's a Hammond B3, lots of really interesting instruments like dulcimers and a gong and a percussion rack. And
everybody needs a gong. You need the big.
Yeah, I have a tiny gong,
arena gong behind you.
But it's the good news is it's just, if it's in this room, it's set out, it's got a microphone on it, it's labeled, it's up on the console, so there's no sort of technical process. I've dreamt about this, keeping that whole like, well, maybe we should do a couple of guitar overdubs, and wouldn't it be nice to do like a Juno synth? Man, by the time you do a casting call and set up all of that stuff, you're outside of the moment, and it just takes so long to book a day of overdubs. Or if you're writing, making a wish list, like, well, after the artist leaves, I'm going to do this, this, and this.
Right. You
like,
don't remember.
Just jump into the chair and let's make some music. And honestly, just even in the writing process of Nashville, we'll be in the room for 4 hours, and some of this stuff's, for me, I don't really want to change much of it. I want to put it on a record. It sounds great. And if I
Yeah.
need musicians, we call it drive-by sessions. I'm literally, texting a few friends saying, hey, are you near the row, or, are you around at 4 o'clock? And they're like, yeah, we can swing by. Don't have to bring anything. I've, just literally the greatest musicians on the, amidst the greatest musicians on
Yeah.
the planet are in Nashville, and we can call any of them and they can just sneak over. We hand them a coffee and they can sit at a drum kit or play any of the stuff that's laying around the room. And I don't have to recut it either.
It's a cool way to work. I mean, took me a long time to evolve my studio to that point too, where I'm trying to keep everything mic'd up. It's not quite as elegantly, permanently mic'd up and ready to go. Like this drum kit, the way you got it right now, you have this one ginormous stand, and like every mic on the drum kit practically is coming off of one stand.
Well, yeah. So shout out to our Triad Orbit friends as well too. The immense, incredible Starbird stand is hosting every single microphone on this drum kit except for the kick mics. We did have them on an arm. We do want to pull this drum kit in and out. I have 4 different drum kits, so if I want to swap the drums really fast, it's just easier to. It's more out of our convenience of striking it. But we had at that point, we had 11 mics on one stand for the entire drum kit. Now we have 9 mics on one stand that we can pull that way, and then we can just move the kick drum mic, throw an old vintage Ludwig kit down, kind of just wheel the mics back up, rough them in, and we've swapped the entire drum kit with the pertinent microphones literally in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's amazing. And having the stuff set up means it's so much faster for making records. I think I remember one of the earliest interviews I did on this podcast was with John Fields. I think he was he's from Minneapolis, but he was talking about if you want to record a lot of stuff, have it ready to go, and so I finally evolved there. But it's interesting how maybe that's the evolution of studios too, in a way.
Well, I think it is, and I think it's every production room. Everybody's got their tools. Even if you're in the box, you've collected your virtual instruments. Everyone who's ever got the new Serum or the new Omnisphere, whatever, you spend your afternoon. You go through your presets. You mark your favorites. You try to kind of get ready to understand, to have a toolkit and a palette ready for when the artist is in the room and you're looking for Hollywood strings, or you're looking for, a sine wave lead synth. You can get there quickly. I think a lot of people wonder if I'm a gear collector, and it's not real. I don't collect gear. This is not a collection. It's all deployed. Part of the thing is to have all of this stuff set up. If I had a guitar rig, like one amp and like a guitar, and then one drum kit or whatever, I'd in essence be set up to make the same record over and over again as well. So I think over the years I've collected a lot of different things, and yes, they're all set up in this room, which is it's a little overwhelming, but I've got great engineers and interns, and we have a lot of fun listening to new microphones and shooting it out. And there's literally new gear and instruments showing up in this room, and have been for, a decade and a half every week.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there's been a single week in my entire life where there isn't a new instrument or microphone or outboard piece or plugin or, music technology, some of the editing technology that's come around, the Waves, just sort of released vocal alignment editing that's ARA built right into Pro Tools. That's just incredible for thick pop productions with hundreds of vocals. And so we all learn, we get together and we share information and we nerd out on it as soon as it's available.
From synths to strings to studio guitars, Complete 15 has it all. Native Instruments' flagship bundle gives you everything you need to create pro music in any genre, with cutting-edge instruments like Contact 8, Massive X, battery, guitar rig, and session guitarist for lifelike electric and acoustic guitar parts. Use our code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com, or get started with Complete Start totally free. Let me think. I want to rewind a little bit. You were talking about going through patches on synthesizers, the latest update and favoriting. So, few questions around that or things that come to mind. One is a process of favoriting things and then finding them later. I guess depending if you open the particular app, there's hopefully a favorites area, and so you can go straight to there. Two is, do you rename those patches sometimes? Like they come up, they have their own names, but do you even care? Because when you said we need Hollywood strings, I picture you in a session with a client, somebody, an artist, and it's like, hey, can we put some like Hollywood strings on this? Or like, do you find that there's language that gets used in the studio and those are the names to rename some of the patches?
Yeah, I mean, people who know the technology that might have, a patch might name a patch by name, and that's super easy to find. That's great. If they're using descriptive words, you've got to work together and be able to craft something. I do tend to gravitate towards plugins, ecosystems, and DAWs that allow a little bit better collective management because,
So
at this
stuff.
point, who doesn't have a million presets at their, disposal? It's what I do love about the creation aspect of being in this room. Like I have a Juno that only has, 66 presets, and when I'm working with somebody and they move the faders around and they create a cool little pad or patch or sound, I immediately save that. I love that. And it's like this personal collection of things that sound pretty inspiring and amazing.
Yeah.
And I've got a Jupiter and a Prophet and a Juno and a Moog Little Fatty, and it's like tactical. I also like the aspect that I can just grab at some faders, and I can, but I don't save a preset.
Right.
So I never come back to that sound. I'm recording it. It's not in MIDI. We're playing the instrument, and that way, like I said before, if I had one thing, I'd be making the same record over and over again. I really do gravitate towards things that once you find the magic and you know it's magic, you're probably unlikely to be able to ever create that again.
Right. It's almost like getting the perfect take, the ideal performance in the studio. It happens in that moment and you need to be in record. And I think about like famous records made by famous bands. And it occurred to me one day, I bet if they went back in and did the same song in the studio, they also couldn't recreate it exactly the same way,
So when you're on synths and the old school stuff like that, like it had to be really special for you to grab the cassette recorder and plug the little data cable in and then do the dump. You could that's how the only way you're like archiving that preset to get back to it, which is important if you create a massive hit song like some of those synths were used on Journey records, or to be able to tour and just even find those the way all the faders on that synth were that day.
Yeah.
And we forget a little bit about that. And I had a band in that I was working with fairly recently that had dialed this magical patch in, and nobody really thought to like save it or dump it to a cassette or just have access to it. And then when it came time to tour, they spent an entire afternoon, on the patch number trying to match and solo the recording and get it close. And we just never quite got there again.
There's a lot of ways to spend a lot of time in the studio before you get rolling. Like we took a minute to set up everything just to do a video interview in here. And it's, it's just a good reminder. So like that, having things set up, in your studio where you've got all the instruments ready to go, and then, turning to an analog synth and just thinking, I'm just going to come up with a cool sound that works for this song today.
Yeah. In this moment. Yeah, for sure. And for me, it's tricky. I wear a lot of different hats. I don't not consider myself an engineer. I'm not like, I'm a producer artist, but I'm a producer artist. I'm a producer songwriter. And it's very important with those hats to not be taking time out of the creative process for the technical aspect of it. When somebody has an idea, for them to just jump on a microphone and lay it down. I've got this room secretly wired with other vocal mics. I've got an SM7 beside the couch. If somebody happens to be sitting there and they're singing a harmony, it's like, hey, grab that. It's already on input. I have a tracking template for this whole room. I've got a beautiful M49 that was a piece of the classic history from Columbia 30th Street that we were lucky to acquire. That's like I leave up in the vocal booth. It's, it's not the mic that I always choose in a shootout if we're making a record, but in the heat of the moment, that's made it on a lot of records because it's incredible.
Yeah.
And amazing. And
does it have the jewel in it?
It's got the jewel in it. Yeah. And so I found a bunch of cool old photographs from Columbia 30th Street of black and whites of Barbra Streisand and Kind of Blue, Miles Davis. There is a lot of great history. I think that some of the folklore and some of the amazing equipment and things that are around Nashville, it's just important, like on a more of a spirit folklore mood level of like feeling connected to the history of music rather than like bragging rights. I don't acquire stuff because it was the, guitar from so-and-so or the microphone from so-and-so, but it's nice to connect with our inspirations in history. And, when you've got stuff that was used on famous records in famous places, it's I watch artists feel like they've literally said, well, I better step up now. I better bring my A game.
Right, because they walk in and they see all
like
this.
what an honor to kind of be a piece of this history. There's so much history down here and being on Music Row.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I was oblivious to the history in Nashville. I've always been very connected to it, but like being on the corner of Music Square and Music Circle at this point, across the street from RCA Studios, which is still here, Quonset Hut and Decca, which is still here, and this building, which was, Tom Hidley and Glenn Meadows, going back to the 70s, all the amazing sort of history. It just makes me a bit more grateful, I think, and just sort of in tune to like, wow, I get to be an ambassador and a curator of this amazing history in this amazing town. And
I agree. I mean, I think that there's a great part of what we do when we're making music and records is presenting story through song.
Yeah.
And so like there's an extension of the story and the whole history of music. And, when I had my MCI console in the studio, being able to somehow be connected to the history of what was going on was great. It was inspiring.
My father played on a lot of records in the 60s and 70s and was the original bass player for the Hawks back in the 50s with Levon Helm and John Till, who was Janis Joplin's guitar player later in life, and Richard Manuel from our hometown, who was later the band, and Bob Dylan. And so Dad's instruments have this sort of pedigree and history. Dad was in a folk band with Ian and Sylvia called The Great Speckled Bird, and they did the very first recording at what is now the Sound Emporium in Nashville.
Oh, wow.
For Cowboy Jack, with a young 19-year-old Todd Rundgren producing. In the heyday of the crazy 60s, the Woodstock hippies came to Nashville. And a lot of the Nashville bass players, and Dad's bass is the center point in this room. His 62 Fender Jazz is hanging in the middle of the room. It's the first thing I hung in this room when we came in. It was like that. That went up, and we built the room around that. But, over the years, if you actually go to my Instagram, I think I have like a highlights reel for that bass.
Oh, I'll get some B-roll footage and try and edit
Kenny's
it
bass.
Cool.
And everybody from Greg Wells and Keith Urban and Norbert Putnam from, Elvis fame history, and John Petitucci and our dear Michael Rhodes. I don't want to start naming the list because I'm going to leave so many people off.
Yeah.
So many bass players know that bass. They call it the Great Speckled Bass because of the band.
That's great.
That Dad was in the 60s. And I watched them pick it up. This is Michael Rhodes. These are the greatest bass players of our generation.
Yeah.
And they get excited to play it and put it on the record we're working on. And you watch their energy change and them picking up this instrument that just they know the mojo. I own some old guitars. I wish I knew the mojo, and it doesn't have to be famous. I just wish I knew the history of the people that had this instrument in their home or maybe made their living making music or whatever. But when you can actually connect the story and the history and things to it, it's really interesting to watch it muse a special performance out of somebody. And I've watched it with that bass happen, since I brought it to Nashville many years ago. And so I like the history. I like telling the ghost stories. I like um, a lot of that, and it's not a collector with bragging rights having rare things. It really is more about just sharing. It's like going down to Muscle Shoals and recording. You book 6 hours to get one song. And it's like, well, we could probably get 3 or 4. No. We're going to record for an hour, but we're going to tell stories for 5 hours.
Right.
Like, David Hood and Spooner Oldham on a session. I want those stories. I'm not bean counting on my watch.
At Isotope, mixing and mastering just got even smarter. Velvet gives you silky vocals with sibilance, learn, de-essing, dynamic tone shaping, and de-click, all in one plugin. And Ozone 11 now includes clarity, upward compression, and AI-powered stem focus to help you master like a pro. Use code ROCK10 for 10% off Ozone or any of Isotope's incredible plugins at isotope.com. What are some stories of either this part of Music Row here or Muscle Shoals, which is that's a whole nother topic we could go deeper into too, that sort of come to mind for you? Anything, any favorites or anything that pops up?
Oh, there's so many, Lidge. We could just do a storytelling podcast, which would be amazing.
How about ghost stories about right here? Anything?
This building?
Yeah, this building or this stories? Or Music Row.
There are remnants in this building that I probably don't have the right to share either.
Right.
Our landlords have some in the rafters. I get to wander around the rafters now, and I've got a plate reverb from Cowboy Jack that was used on Angel of Harlem, the track that he did with them down in Memphis, and here it's a Lawson plate, and it's the Bono vocal reverb on that track.
Wow.
I've got the RCA plate number 2, which when Ben Folds was tearing out of there, and they were kind of tooling back over for Dave Cobb and Aubrey and taking stuff over. The plates from RCA came over to my studio. We hooked them all up and listened to them. And the one I chose just happened to be the Roy Orbison, Elvis, the really great. It was sort of their house favorite plate. I can validate that's exactly where it came from in the years it was there, and it was marked as the favorite. So we could go discography diving and just figure out what records and what reverb.
Yeah.
Of the history of all of that.
Now, how about chamber? Because I remember, that was one of the things that you had put in some real, signature personal effort into, was building a chamber at your last studio, which I assume you couldn't bring it over.
Can't take the chamber with you. No, but we passed it on to music makers, and so there was a moment in time when John and I were, dissolving the original incarnation with all that real estate. And I was thinking about this and retooling into a production environment and bringing our office and an Atmos room and a production room and a studio and our whole team down to Music Row. It was about the best deal on the real estate. And some of the buyers, we had somebody wanted to turn it into a lawyer's offices. We had somebody else wanted to rip it all out and turn it into a spa. And, Jonathan didn't want that. I didn't want that. And we found the Living Legacy Foundation that owns Gold Pacific Studios. Dan and Alicia Ballard bought the studio. It's now Gold Pacific. He's got the chamber up and rocking, brought an API console in. It's everything we did is still part of the history of Nashville in a music sense, and it didn't get gentrified and demolished as so much of Nashville and Nashville's history is. So for now, even though it's just in the last decade or two, that is all still perfectly, everything we did and built, it's in new hands, but it's perfectly intact and making music in Music City.
That's great. It's a beautiful spot. I mean, it's okay to turn a spa into a studio, but let's not go turn a studio into a spa. You know what I'm saying? So one of the things that you had mentioned to me was getting a new publishing deal.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
So tell us about that. What is a publishing deal? Why do you want it? And what's the one that you're going into now?
Part of this sort of transition and us moving down to Music Row was a big reset button. And again, it was like reflecting on what my motivations of being a musician and a music maker, I wasn't born into the world an engineer and a record producer. That sort of happened vicariously through the process of being, for me, a musician specifically, and a songwriter and a creative. Young in life, I was joining bands. Very, very young in life, as a little boy, I was around my father and all his friends. I grew up in studios and around musicians collaborating, and the sort of the reimagination, or the big reset button, the great reset. Like, wow, we did so amazing over here for 15 years. I get to rebuild. Like, I get to kind of build my dream production room. What does that look like? Well, I love every record I've gotten to participate in, but I wasn't always necessary. And when you have a multi-building, multi-room, multi-million-dollar facility, you're in the business of servicing recording records and doing recording sessions. And I was always trying to divide my time into developing new artists and A&R and writing and producing from the ground up. That always had to take a back seat to the sort of enormous operation with a whole staff and the everything involved. So given the blank slate, I took everything that I had created and written and developed and went to a dear friend of mine, Leslie DePiro, who's been a really great champion of mine she was putting me in the room with a lot of artists before I was, recognized as a songwriter, just because she believed in me as a producer and as a songwriter primarily, and that aspect of me focusing on it. And I had to pay my bills, so I played guitar on a lot of sessions. I mixed a lot of records, which I love, and I'm still mixing records, and I'm still playing guitar out on sessions.
Plus, you learn so much going through those processes.
But I come from it. I really come at all of this from the guitar chair. It's where I've always been and what I've always done. When I got to Reset, and Leslie, she was at AAM and running the ship there for years, and Tree Vibes for years. She started, got brought in to help start Jonas Entertainment Group with Kevin Jonas Sr. And basically, I brought everything I had to her and was like, if there's a time to focus on, creating music from the ground up as a creative, rather than the utility of making a record where the songs have already been chosen and the artistry is already developed, which I still do. I'm not saying I don't, but man, there's nothing more exciting than jumping up on stage with an artist for their very first time, playing at the Ryman on Opry night, singing their first song, like just feeling like we are igniting and launching something and helping someone start their music career. That's always been the most exciting thing to me ever. And to be able to feel like I'm somehow participating in that every day in the room as new writers come in and as new artists come in, is something that I wanted to do. So I signed a publishing deal with Jonas Entertainment Group. And there's a lot of music we've been recording. Some of it's out to the world and being released through that. Leslie connected me with Mickey Guyton years ago, and I've gotten songs on both records as a producer and a writer. And connected with Karen Kasowski, who produces and writes the majority of the music in Mickey's career. And I'll hop in the engineer chair and hang out, or the guitar chair. I played guitar for some stuff for Karen, and I've recorded most of the tracks.
Easier to do in your new studio setup too, where you can just step right over to instruments.
Yeah, well, and for those sessions, those are traditional band sessions. We'll just go to Blackbird or Ocean Way, or again, I've been recording at Curb 43. So Curb's my great new landlord down on the row. it's pretty funny. We put lids on a bunch of these cases and we roll them down the sidewalk, and then we block traffic and roll them across the crosswalk, roll them into the studio, and take over Curb 43 for a couple of days. It's a world-class, beautiful studio with tons of outboard and a new API console.
Yeah.
The room sounds amazing. It reminds me very much of my original Addiction Sound Studios. And the beautiful thing is I get to leave at 5 o'clock, and I don't have to, I don't have to do the snack inventory. I don't have to do tech reports. It's not my staff, not my crew, not my assistant engineers, not my interns. And I'm not paying for the place the other 20 days a month I'm not in there tracking records.
Yeah.
So I have like the dream life here. I get to come in and sort of create, and then I'm still doing the full band tracking stuff wherever I need to, and to wrap up the publishing thing, I've written and recorded close to 40 songs last year. I know that that's not a lot. Some, like a staff writer, they'll do 300 songs in a year.
Wow.
But I also made 11 records, mixed 6 records, and played guitar on 400 sessions. Like, I'm still doing what I used to do, but I'm choosing my work, I'm scaling it back, and my focus, any open date, I've got new writers, new artists in the room, and we're making new music.
So when you are doing the writing stuff, do you find yourself in situations like some of these traditional Nashville co-writing things where it's just 2 acoustic guitars and you're in a room figuring out a song, or is it
I always start
deeper
that
into
way.
the process?
I start that way. I don't offer myself up as, and this is just me, this is not necessarily Nashville or anybody. Everybody has their own what they lead with. I don't necessarily offer myself up as a track guy. I'm a guitar player. I love contributing to melody. I have like one good idea out of 1,000 in the room. I might get one high five in 4 hours and get like one lyric in the song, but I'm still sort of fighting for it. I like to start on acoustic guitar and keep it like, if this song is compelling enough in its rawest form, it helps me not have to then spend 3 days and money and think about production on stuff that isn't haunting me and compelling me to a certain extent. It's like, I kind of back to the strongest songs are amazing just on an acoustic guitar and a vocal. Like, wow, what a song. Let's record this. It's kind of a no-brainer. If a song's that good in the room, I will spin the chair around and start building the track and throw a couple of extra things down. And after the artist leaves, you can see my car here at midnight. I'm ensconced. I've put keys and piano down. I've like done a casting call in my brain of the musicians I want on it. And I guess the difference is I don't do demos. Like if I'm going to record, if I'm going to come to work in a room that I've spent my life building in a city with the best musicians in the world, in the biggest, best, greatest studios in the world, why would I dumb it down and give myself 30 minutes and a small budget? It's like, if I'm recording something, it's a record in my mind. The recipient can call it a demo, or they can put it on their demo pile, or they can pitch it to other artists, or they can turn it down. But most of the time, by the time it sort of makes it through that gatekeeping process for me, it's been compelling enough for me to advance. I invite the artist to the studio. They can call it a demo session if they want, but it's like, hey, we're going to cut that song today or on this day.
Yeah.
And it's this sort of magical experience. And that's the record. That's the stuff that I have on records. That's how anything that I've, if you look through my discography that I was the writer producer on, that's been the process. It hasn't been, like this sort of sectional, isolated separation from the song where it's now we have a budget to go record and they liked the demo and now we're going to go beat the demo. For me, there's never really a demo. Also, I'm not precious about it. If they call my song a demo and another producer is on a project with an artist and they want to go in and cut it with a band, fantastic, wonderful. Like a win is a win. Like, but if I'm going to get my sorry ass out of bed and drive down to Music Row, I'm making a record every day.
Are you ready to launch your career in the audio or entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, right here in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs to prepare you for the industry. From studio production and live sound to audio for film and a whole lot more. You'll learn by doing, working with professional-grade gear alongside experienced industry pros. If you're more into the business side of entertainment, SAE's Entertainment Business Program teaches essential basics like contracts and promotion to help you navigate the industry. With diploma, associate, or bachelor's degrees, there's a path for everyone. Plus, Career Services supports graduates as they take the next step. Want to see it for yourself? Immerse yourself in Nashville's exciting music scene and book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. Howdy, rock stars. We're back now for the jam session. My guest today is David Kalmusky, joining us here at Addiction Studios, this beautiful on location. One of my first remote interviews, actually, Dave.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, well, welcome. I'm glad you come here.
Are you ready to jam?
Let's jam.
All right. Tell us also about, now we're sitting in your control room, which is gorgeous, and but down the hallway, you also built an Atmos room. Is that correct?
Maybe, so correct me if I'm wrong, listeners and viewers, America's only. I'm not going to say worldwide because I think there's probably somewhere else. Atmos Martini Wet Bar.
The Atmos Martini Wet Bar.
Yeah, we have a full bar with a nice bourbon collection and martini bar. We changed our suite, our lounge, into an Atmos immersive mixing room. It's also a like a producer room, and a writing room. And rather than just kind of like tear it all out, we actually kept the velvet curtains and the just the comfortable couch and decided not to make it like this. This is like a Tom Hidley $1 million mix room.
Yeah.
That is a really cozy, amazing, immersive Atmos room that's just really comfortable to do other things than Atmos in, but to certainly do Atmos in.
So so what kind of stuff did you put into the room?
So we partnered with a bunch of our amazing manufacturer friends, Zaor Desks. We've got this beautiful little solid. It's a small room, and so it's hard to put like a really professional audio desk. Zaor makes an incredible desk for our room. Maybe we'll try to include some pictures and B-roll for you. I think you can check it out on our Instagram too. I've been posting pictures of it. We literally just sort of finished building it. We've got the Focusrite Red 16 interface. The converters sound amazing. They've got great monitor control. We partnered with Atom speakers, and we're using the T-Series speakers, and Avid for a Pro Tools dock, single fader, but lots of control and Avid control features. It's like a little bit of everything from all my favorite ecosystems in a room. The triad orbit mounting solutions from the ceilings and even the wall mounted speakers are just rock solid. You can lean on it if you need to. But it's really non-intrusive. It's actually like you could be working and writing and creating and building tracks in that room, or have lunch in that room,
or have a martini in
a martini in that room, and be like, oh, is this an Atmos room? Like it's actually pretty inconspicuous and very comfortable.
That's awesome. When you're talking about the T-Series, so like the T3V,
I think these are called T7s.
T7s, okay, great. And then when you set up an Atmos room like that, do you think about all the speakers being the same speaker, except for the sub, right?
Well, I do. We consulted with Adam and Dolby, and, we wanted to, again, I didn't like turn the room into this perfectly sterile work environment. I wanted a lounge. And atmosphere. So we're probably a little bit out of spec here and there, but I wanted to do it proper and right. And I wanted to use ecosystems that were, full and complete. I didn't want to sort of hodgepodge together something out of spare parts. It's done perfectly on an audio level. the environment, and we acoustically treated the room. We built panels, but we built the panels out of the same velvet that the couch and the curtains were made out of. So we just more of an aesthetic thing. We didn't want it to feel like this, like we're at the studio in a production room. You could actually be in there to write songs and hang out, and it doesn't necessarily feel like a recording studio in there. It's almost surprising that there's speakers all over the room, because it feels like, and it doesn't feel like we can watch Netflix in there and just. But
you'll be doing some Atmos mixes in there.
We've actually handed in. We did the song. If you listen to the spatial mix of the Kevin Jonas senior Christmas record that was out this year, those were the first Atmos mixes we started in our Atmos room. Mickey Guyton's song I Still Do, off of the new record that is currently out right now, which is House on Fire. We are mixing the new John Oates record, all of the singles in Atmos, currently in that room. That'll be out very shortly. So we've hit the ground running. We've been finishing the room and then cleaning it up so we can work in it while it's not finished. And this is honestly the first week where it's like we actually dusted it and vacuumed it, and it's like, it's pristine, and we're done. That's ready. Awesome. We're ready to just make music.
That's when you take photos.
Yeah, we've been sneaking some photos on our Addiction Sound Instagram.
Yeah, I feel like when you the moment you finish building your studio, before you work in it, you got to take lots of photos of it, because it'll never look quite that clean again, right?
It's funny, if you go to like the Addiction Sound website, we got so eager to take photos in this room, the production room, that there's like no drum kit set up. There's like 4 guitars. The synth wall isn't back there. It's like, oh, that was, we have like club rules over here now. So it's like 1 in, 1 out, like we're at capacity because there's a nice, perfect amount of elbow room. It doesn't feel like we're to the rafters.
Right.
And, a space can get overwhelming if you're just like cramming it full of everything you want. So what ends up happening for us is, it's got to be special to be in the room. Like, it's actually survived. It's almost, it's almost like the evolution concept of survival of the fittest for music production. For me, it's like, what can I sacrifice to put another amp or guitar in this room? Like, what's got to go?
Right.
Not like, let's cram it or pile it on top of something. Like, I love the current layout of this room. I'm not going to sacrifice it for clutter. I will sacrifice lesser pieces of equipment or instruments for better ones.
Right. Yeah. It's tricky because sometimes we want a lot of instruments, but there's only so many we're actually going to use, right, too. So we don't need, and we don't necessarily need things that do the same thing.
That's right. And, out of the 60 guitars in this general, this room, and there's a guitar vault room around the corner. It's not like there's 13 Stratocasters. Like, I'm not a collector.
Right.
I have 2 Stratocasters that are very different inherently. One is also stayed tuned to whole tone down. And I kind of have like my favorite Gretsch. I've owned 11 or 12 Gretches over the last, couple of decades. And when I get like, it's interestingly, even before this room, I've always practiced that. Like, I don't need a whole pile of vintage Gretches. Some of them, the intonation's a little tricky on. Some of them don't play as well. Some of them the Bigsby catches up on.
Right.
When I find a better one, I lose the other one, So right now that's a 59 double anniversary, and it growls at you when you play it acoustically. It's actually shocking how resonant and alive that guitar is. And everyone who plays it, agrees, like all the session players in town and my friends that come in and record on these instruments. I feel the same way about every guitar in this room. Like, I have 2 Telecasters. I have the Telecaster that I grew up touring North America and Europe with. And then I have my dad's old Telecaster that was John Till's from Janis Joplin's.
That's the one right next to the bass up there.
Right next to the bass.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to keep that for family heirloom stuff. But I have one great Les Paul and one great 345 and one great Gretsch. And, you go down the ladder and it's like, I have a Fender Bass 6 and I have a baritone and I have, like all the little things. I have like high-strung electric guitars and
that's cool to hear. I actually have one high-string electric, but I haven't really been using it much yet. So where and how do you find the high-string electric? You're talking about high-string tuning, right?
Yeah, and I make my own. And usually if I'm going to do like a high-strung guitar, I'm not going to turn a 63 Stratocaster into a high-strung guitar. I'm going to go buy a Paul Reed Smith SE guitar for $400 that's like beautifully built, and it's a great playing, perfectly intonated guitar. And I'm going to get a custom little bridge made on it, or I'll take it to a great guitar tech and say, let's high-strung this thing, So I try to keep all the vintage sort of amazing guitars as intended. They might have some alternate tunings, but I'm not going to change the gauge value of them.
Right. So when I think about a high string for an acoustic, I think about the classic combination of strumming a chord on a 6-string and then strumming it on the high string, and now you have this sort of otherworldly
perfectly tuned 12-string.
Yeah, perfectly tuned 12-string. Do you use a high-strung electric in the same way? Would you double the same guitar part, or is it a different kind of thinking, you think?
So I have a 12-string electric guitar. Like, it's a Dan Electro. It's nothing that special, but it just plays so well. The neck's never budged on it. It's intonated perfectly. It just comes out of the vault on a session, completely tuned, sounding great.
Nice.
And so I've had really sort of expensive, rare. I had a Rickenbacker that was probably now worth a lot of value, but I was battling and fighting that guitar. I had a Fender 12, same thing. It wouldn't intonate past the 4th fret, and this cheaper, I don't even know how they're made, Dan Electro 1. It just wins. Whatever sounds amazing and feels great wins. I'm not a vintage snob. I don't care about its resale value. These are for me to play, and so when something needs a 12-string part, for me, it's like I'm going for a 12-string sound. I want the attack of each note to not be fumbled by human doubling performance issues, and it's like it's going to be a Byrds sounding line or a Led Zeppelin sounding line or something that I'm clearly playing a 12-string on. So when I elect to play a high strung, whether it's acoustic or electric, my approach typically is to find a beautiful little arpeggio that's just what I actually love about the high strung is the crossing of the notes that with the high B and E being natural. And then, the G string jumping an octave. When I pick up a high strung guitar, I really try to play chord inversions that are using the D and G and B and A strings to get that strange sort of octave crossover in an arpeggio out of like typical D formation chords. And it's nothing that tricky, but it sounds so wide and ethereal and beautiful. They're just, it's a trick, it sounds like a trick to me.
Yeah, because if you play the lower strings, the first 4 strings.
Yeah, it just sounds like you're capoed up, or you're,
it just sounds like
playing
you're way capoed
high
up, or it's like you've got light gauge strings on the guitar.
I kind of like the last, the high 4 strings of a high strung guitar, and I'll find a part that really sparkles and makes that instrument stand alone and be magical. Or I'll play a 12-string. To have the symbiotic performance of a part.
You don't need to play guitar to sound like a pro. Session guitarist from Native Instruments delivers hundreds of lifelike guitar performances, both electric and acoustic, right inside Contact. Whether you're laying down rockin' electric riffs or warm acoustic beds, you'll get 154 electric guitar patterns and over 250 acoustic guitar grooves for strumming and fingerpicking. all grouped into song-ready presets. Dial in recording quality tone with built-in amps, cabinets, mic modeling, and effects. You can drag and drop MIDI into your tracks effortlessly, then tweak tempo, tuning, and feel to fit your song. And with new session packs on the way, you'll never run out of inspiration. Visit nativeinstruments.com, use the code ROCK10 for 10% off, and bring full guitar performances to your next track. No more blisters on your fingers. I was watching this video interview with Rick Beato and Dweezil Zappa, and Dweezil was talking about his dad's guitars and how his dad would play with sevens, his strings.
Oh, sure.
Super light. Do you ever play with ultra light strings on guitars?
A couple. It's interesting. Our friend Guthrie Trapp here in Nashville has been hanging out with Billy Gibbons. And, you hear Billy Gibbons' big tone on all those early ZZ Top records. And I don't know that Billy's playing sevens, but he might be like on eights or like some really light strings. And there's a famous story about B.B. King, I think, picking up Stevie Ray Vaughan's guitar, and I might be paraphrasing, and this might be folklore and bullshit that I'm making up. But I've heard the phrase because Stevie Ray Vaughan was playing like, I think 13 to 62s or something, just insane, and tuned down to E flat just so that the guitar could handle the tension. And what the story I've heard, there's no verification for this, is that B.B. King said, "Why are you working so hard?" And that B.B. plays eights.
Oh, wow.
That's what I've heard. Could be total nonsense. We need to fact check that.
No, I've heard well, don't worry, we got fact checkers out there. It's called the comment section.
Oh,
I'm
sure I'll be called out.
You just let us know.
100%. I'm just letting you know what the people are saying, like the
only
word on the
speak
street.
For the people. I can speak for the people.
Yeah.
So the story I heard was that Stevie would start out the tour with like-gauge strings, and as was building up his strength, he'd work his way up to the 12s or the whatever.
Well, I know people we could ask. Maybe we should ask.
Yeah. I mean, I do think there's different tonality to different gauge strings too.
Oh, there certainly is, and it makes you play differently as well too. Like
it is hard. You do have.
I'm
to play
a pretty aggressive player, and historically through my career as a live guitar player, I was always like 11 to 56. I did a custom gauge, which is kind of a light top, heavy bottom, but it was a little bit even more exaggerated than that. I was always sort of a heavier string player, and so on a lot of these guitars. For me, I feel like what's most fun for the guitar I'm holding, like that Gretsch is 10 to 52s. That's a light top, heavy bottom. That's a stock set. But like the Strat, I want it to be slinky. I want to bend a tone and a half on it. And so I'm kind of doing the opposite of the Stevie Ray Vaughan thing on my Stratocasters. And those are stock 9s, like, 9 to 46 or whatever on that Strat. Then I have another 63 Strat that's actually sitting behind you. That's 10 to 52s. And it's tuned down to a D. So it's like I'm a totally different guitar player on that Strat. They're the same year. But I'm a totally different guitar player on the red Strat than I am on the Sunburst Strat.
Yeah, I love all that stuff. I mean, I'm a guitar player too, and a lot of our audience are guitar players as well. So like the appreciation of the variety of guitars, somebody asked me how many guitars I had the other day, and I'd never actually counted. So I did a quick mental count. I was like, how do I have 22 guitars? How can I have 22 guitars?
It doesn't take long.
You start collecting.
You hide them in corners. So we brought 60 into this building and its satellite locations, but we've been kind of purging and downsizing, and those aren't all like vintage amazing guitars. Like I've got some really cool old. I mean, it's hanging on the wall with the really expensive ones. There's like a Silvertone 60s guitar I got on eBay for maybe $200, and it showed up in a cardboard box. And I expected it to be a project guitar, and I plugged it in. And I played it on a record that day, and it's just magic and interesting, and again, makes me a different guitar player. It's a little dull, and it's quirky, and it's melancholy, and it's not like Rubber Bridge, but this like round wound strings kind of die out on it faster than usual, and you find chord voicings that feel haunting and mysterious on that guitar. Play the same chord voicing on a Strat with like one of your brighter pickup selections, and it's sterile, and it's not a cool part.
Yeah, it's fascinating how like I've got a Strat. That was the first one I got, and fortunately or unfortunately, whatever. I mean, it is a US one from the 80s, so it's actually now it's kind of vintage, I guess. But but it had the Fender Lace pickups on it. And, now I sort of long for more of a classic, older Strat. But, it's funny how different all those can sound. And like the high strings respond differently on different things, but it plays in tune, so it gets used a lot.
And every time I get a new guitar, I overplay it. I use it on too many sessions.
Yeah.
But I find new things. I become a new player, and like it inspires me. Oh, it's kind of exciting and new, and I spend more time being a guitar player as a musician. It's almost like going through sound libraries. We talked about finding synth patches and stuff. If I like buy a new amazing VI plugin, in my process, like I'll take a Sunday and I'll drive to the studio knowing that I'm just going to drink coffee and sit and literally flip through 10,000 presets and put stars beside the ones I like, because I don't want to sift through that stuff in a room. I'll also keep kind of a little spreadsheet on some things where I'll start to try to curate favorites. That's the thing I love about Ableton as well, is I have collections. So I can just save the plugin in a state, or the VI in a state where it's saved with that preset loaded. And then I can name it whatever I want. And it's like wobbly dark sine wave.
Wobbly dark Dave.
Wobbly dark Dave.
David. Wobbly dark David. So do you when you're going?
Sorry, and I was going to finish my point.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Is in that process, I end up writing about 7 or 8 songs, because the sound inspires this thing, and I'm like, oh man, I got to make a little beat here, and I got to do a thing, and I'll put a piano on behind it, and I start recording these sounds that I fall in love with. And that's kind of my little grab bag of creative tools that I'll bring as little track starters into the room with songwriters and top liners. Guitars are the same way for me. Like I'll find 4 or 5 songs in a new guitar on the first day I have it. And they're always kind of like the most special. I feel like it's almost like taking my energy and draining my songs out of that instrument, overplaying it and overusing it, putting it into that sort of grab bag catalog of song starter ideas. And then it goes into the options, into the collections. It hangs on the wall for a bit, and it's not always a class favorite anymore. I'll start on something, more historic for me. I've got a guitar I've had for, longer than the others, so I'll play that one.
Let me rewind a little bit, just in case I was hearing you correctly, but song starter favorites, you're talking about instruments, but also when you talk about the synths and finding these sound patches, because again, I think this is familiar for any of us who are going down this avenue. It's like, it's easy to get into overwhelm, and then you're trying to figure out, how do I stay productive with it? So when I pull up patches, because there's so much character in patches, pre-made patches on synthesizers, it inspires me to want to make a song that goes that direction or something like that.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So then you're, if I'm hearing you, in Ableton, you might like whip up a sketch or something, and so then now you've written 7 songs. What's your way of having, like, you can't listen to a session to remember what it sounded like. You'd have to listen to a mix of it. Do you have some clever way for keeping track? It's not clever,
but I'll always do a really fast, like in Ableton, you can just select your bounce of the 2 mix of whatever it is, and I'll just keep an MP3 in the folder, and I'll just collapse it. And so when my folder trees are all collapsed, and I'll title them weird things, like I'll make up fake song titles maybe, or something moody. There's like So I'll have MP3s, and I'll just click on them, hit the space bar, and OS 10 will give me a little preview of it, what it is for me to remember.
So you can quickly go through those to see what's cool, and then you would know which session to open to get the same
songs. I have to name things in collections as patches a little bit more cleverly, and a lot of that is trial by error. But at least it's narrowed down to like things that I've made or created or modified from manufacturer presets. It'll be unique to me. I'll name it something unique that tries to give me a mood or an ambience or some form of it. And it's pretty easy because I'll have 50 or 60 of those sounds rather than 10,000 from the manufacturer.
Right.
And that's what I'll go dumpster diving through in a creative write. I'll throw some headphones on so I'm not disturbing the room if they're working out like a lyric or something. And then when everybody goes away, I might refine that. I might go back into the pool of 10,000 presets and see if I can beat it and find something better. And, I've sat here just looking for the perfect pad for, a breakdown verse or something. And, I'll spend 3, 4, 5 hours on listening through 4 or 5 different VIs. I'll have 5 or 6 favorites. And when I get to the end of it, I'll print all 5 or 6 so that I can just mute or unmute or
so crucial.
Select them and then go, that's the one.
That's an important part of the creative process that I think it's good for us to be reminded of, is the importance of quick comparisons. It's like speed.
Yeah, because by the time you
right?
shut it down and then drag another VI in and it populates the track and then you hit play again, I want to hear it in real time. I want to hear it switch.
Yeah.
While it's playing, I want to hear the pad switch from A to B to C to D to E to F. And in that instant comparison, usually magic is revealed. It's like, oh, no contest. C is just got the thing and the glue for this track. And then I just delete the rest of them. And that's how I make the decision. But yeah, if you have to stop and load other things, and honestly, some VIs are brutal for that. So much so that I won't, embark on this process with those VIs because the patches take too long to load, and then to be able to star or rate your favorites is so lethargic that
too many
to get back to what
something.
you had or write down the name of patches and I just can't be bothered. I need to stay creative, and there's so much competition out there that people who are making things easy for us to load and compare are kind of winning in my production toolkits.
Yeah. Any new fun synths, digital ones that you've gotten excited about recently?
Oh,
it's probably new. It's probably new patches and bundles that go into existing synths.
Yeah,
right?
I keep every time there's a Native Instruments. I have the Max Native Instruments thing. I didn't even know what that would be worth to buy now. It's just like, you start with the Ultimate and then you upgrade to the Ultimate Max and then whatever. So that ecosystem is always just evolving and there's always new stuff. And I try to go through those samples and sounds and modules.
Favorite them.
And it's so big now that I think it's just maybe too daunting. I have to really rely on filters, filtering through search algorithms.
Right, because it's built in now. You can
it's built in, and it's like I'll find something that's magical, and then I'll be like, when did I get that? Is this recent? And it's like, no, I'll look through the updates, and it's like, no, you've had that for 4 years. You just didn't find it till now to this moment.
The cool thing about Complete Contact, the Complete instance of the plugin, is you can scroll through the sound presets and it gives you a quick taste of what is that sound.
Yeah, and I've got the Complete controller as well too, so I can just scroll through. That sounds interesting enough to me. I can hit a button on I don't have to mess around with the mouse or anything. I can play a little part of it down, and I can kind of keep auditioning and scrolling kind of live while it's in the session and pop it in, and it's really, really great for that.
Yeah, I agree. iZotope is truly amazing for mixing and mastering your music. Check out the new iZotope Velvet plugin, featuring intelligent sibilance learn de-essing that automatically detects harsh frequencies, dynamic tone shaping with lift and tame controls, and transparent declick to clean up mouth noises, pops, and clicks, all in one easy plugin for polished professional vocals. And now Ozone 11 takes your mastering game even further with the new Clarity module for adaptive spectral enhancement, upward compression in the maximizer for increased punch without losing dynamics, and stem focus to process individual elements like vocals or drums with surgical precision. Use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off Velvet, Ozone, or any fantastic plugin at iZotope.com. Well, let's see. One of the things that was mentioned in your bio or in your intro was that you now have amassed over 40 billion streams for your music. So that's like such a striking number. And I just thought to ask
you. It's a lot, but not really. You know, like, I mean, you know, Serban's got 1,000 trillion streams, you know, like that is just a lot of luck and a lot of music and just showing up every day and cranking it out and just having a few records that had massive numbers. I got to work on a Shawn Mendes record that I think that record alone is like, you know, 5 billion of those streams, one record at one point in time in one career. You know, I wear a lot of hats. So like, those aren't records that I wrote, produced, recorded, and, you know, I'm not the artist. And I feel like when you work in the music industry under a lot of hats, working on a lot of records over a long period of time, it's a gift. You get to, it's a striking number because most artists don't have 30 billion streams. But a lot of people, you know, most artists, take a mainstream artist that has a really good run for a decade of top hits. And we're not talking like the mega Taylor Swift stars of the world, just like stars. They have like, if they have a decade, maybe they've worked on 10 records. You know, that's 100 songs. When you show up in a studio every day and, you know, you're working on 4 or 5 or 6 different records at a time, any given month, that's, you know, 60, 70 songs any given month over a year, hundreds, maybe even 1,000 songs on a busy year after 30 years, 30,000 songs being out there probably translates into 30 billion streams, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's an honor, it's a gift. And, you know, there are sites out there now that can kind of count up all the streams. And so you can go on Spotify and go, whoa, 1 million people listen to that song. I've worked on independent songs that have gotten 1 million streams. And it's like, honestly, you know, I play guitar on an indie track that got 1 million streams. I get to count that in my 30 billion, but the artist is amazing.
Right.
And the song is awesome. And it got on a sync license and it got on a show. None of that had anything to do with me. You know, the guitar part is actually trivial. I'm like playing like a little tic-tac strat line through a chorus. Like I just, it's a gift to be on that track. And so I'm also not downplaying it. Like I'm such gratitude that people trust me to work on their records. But when you're, you know, when you work as a mix engineer, as a session guitarist, as a songwriter, as a producer, as an editor, and have been your entire career for a very long period of time, you know, like I said, 29.99 billion of those streams are amazing artists with amazing songs that I got to contribute somehow to.
Right. So if you were talking to somebody who's, you know, younger generation who's like embarking on a career of making records now, what advice might you give them for with regards to keeping track of and collecting your body of work and then making sure that you've sort of planted your seeds in the right places in the garden so that you ultimately benefit from that over time, you know, in terms of things like making sure that you've crossed your T's and dotted your I's and you've signed up for the right organizations, or, you know, have your publishing or your songwriter copyright stuff in place, and anything like that related to
lots like that. I mean, people don't think about admin. They're just having fun sitting in a room. You might mix something really, really great that gets you another gig, that gets you another gig. Then there's 10 indie records that don't see the light of day, and then there's a big hit song. And then, you know, that if you're a mixer, that's the reality of it. You know, it's that massive body of work. Man, I just saw somebody post something about the statistics of like pro athlete, how many shots they took and made it. Everybody is operating with like 3 to 7% success rate. You know, I mean, for the records and plaques I get to hang on the hallway here, it's a small hallway, you know, it's full. for us, but there's also 10,000 songs you've never heard and may never discover, and they're out to the world. I think that it's important, if you aren't a royalty collector and you're going to engineer and you're going to work more on the technical side of helping people make records, and maybe you're you got a staff gig as an assistant or an engineer. You don't have a manager, you don't have a PR team, nobody's keeping track for you. You got to keep track of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And because it does make a difference when and people can fact check. There's so many people that kind of bullshit about working on records, and then you go to All Music and you type their name in, and it's like, oh, you made some stats up, or you weren't really a part of that. Like there are industry resources. I think if you're an engineer, you should be keeping track on what's making it onto All Music or not. There are some other credit sites that can be manipulated that aren't necessarily reliable. And so just be honest and be reliable about the things that you're actually working on. Make it, and if you're like a non-royalty collector engineer, you have to build a business. You're building a brand. You are independent. You can do really well, but you have to do product deals and endorsements, and you have to be brand ambassadors, and you got to jump on podcasts, and you've got to be seen. You've got to network at trade shows. You've got to alpha test and beta test with software companies that are making the plugins and the things that you're using every day, and having a face with those companies that might help your brand ambassador. It's a lot bigger than, hey, I want to mix, or I want to engineer. That's hard. It's actually a little bit easier if you have a couple of hit songs as a songwriter. You hire an admin to take care of all that stuff, and they know where all the little things are, royalties are buried. And you're going to join Sound Exchange as a producer, and you're going to obviously be represented by a PRO as a songwriter. And there's Harry Fox Agency, and as a musician, there's like the AFM collect neighboring rights royalties for records you play on. There's money out there that you gotta track down, and it's different money for different roles. I know enough about it because I play a lot of different roles. So
Right.
I don't want to leave any guitar union money on the table for records I played on that got radio airplay or satellite airplay. And
those 4 notes on that 5 billion play.
That's it. Yeah, absolutely.
Make sure you get your collect your little
exactly. That's kind of the whole point to all of that, is like the significance becomes significant when your body of work is being adminned properly. And you go, well, I haven't done anything important enough to like force this sort of admin behavior because I don't have anything that's gotten over 1 million or 10 million streams. Well, no, start now so that it's in place and it's not overwhelming, because I've left a lot of money on the table from my early career that there's no point in back auditing. I've left unsigned producer agreements on records that actually ended up getting sort of like re-released and ended up in movie syncs and soundtracks. And it's like, I don't even have executed paperwork, and it's been years, and it's little money too. Like, but it's like, well, if I did everything, it's like $4 or $5 grand sitting on the table, but I got to hire a lawyer now to go get that money, and the legal bill is going to be $4 or $5 grand. So that's a wash. But that's here and here and here and here. And, you multiply $4 or $5 grand by 10 times, there's $40,000 or $50,000 sitting on a table that you just literally pay a lawyer to go get the money for. If good practices along the way.
If you'd preemptively just
that's right,
done
and it's like, hey, this is a little indie record. They don't even have a label. Who knows what's going to happen? Like I said, an indie record I played on got 1 million streams. If I were the writer on that, or the producer on that, and I had points and owned a little tiny piece of the artist share of the master, that's what your whole career is going to be. It's going to be fragments and little pieces of all of that stuff. And it's good practice to do your research and learn and understand. Like, if you're a producer, Google it, figure out, where do producer royalties come from? What are the agencies that collect those things? Is it free to join? Sound Exchange is free to join.
Yeah. And there's also that difference between, like, when you start out and you're young, you're working with people who feel like peers, who don't have, fame and fortune yet in their work, but it's good to remember that if you set the right things in place later on, that artist
it's good practice.
Might be at the beginning of a career, and then later all their record catalog is.
Here's a great
valuable.
example. At this point in my time, I've reinvented myself. I've signed a publishing deal, the first publishing deal of my career, and decided to focus on being a songwriter at this late level of my career. It's almost like an occupation change. The first thing I do is I go set up an admin deal. I have a publisher that knows how to do all of that stuff. I switched my PRO because I want to work specifically with the people in town that I know at the PRO and have commonality with. And my catalogs were zero. I'm not waiting until, there's I'm having enough faith that I'm dedicating enough time. And like I said, I've written, 40 or more songs last year that I'm, fingers crossed, I've got some holds. There is 1 or 2 of them are already out to the world. The admin's already in place. Like, I don't even have to worry about it.
Yeah.
It's not like, wait till I get a bite. It's like, no, it's just done and it's taken care of. And if anything blows up and does well, I don't have to fight for anything. I don't have to renegotiate anything. So many people don't even negotiate their involvement as a producer if they're making the tracks for an artist and the artist top lines on it, and it's this ambiguous, like, who owns what. It might be a little awkward, but when I walk into the room with a pop artist and I'm going to build the entire track and do the music and mix the thing, and we're going to use my studio and resources and my admin, that's a 50-50 deal for me, right away. Hey, we own this track. If a label comes along, I'm not going to stand in your way. We'll tear up our agreement and we'll settle for traditional producer rates versus artist ownership or whatever. Like, this is just for the time being for us to get music out to the world.
It's a lot easier to tear up an agreement than it is to
Sure is.
draft one that was never there.
Suddenly somebody picks it up and I'm, I could be an asshole. I could hold them from getting an opportunity. But when you actually kind of write it in that, we will revert to traditional roles if there's an opportunity or whatever, it's actually a safeguard for them as well as it is for you.
Yeah.
It's I want to be fair, and I actually want to protect the artist and my collaborators from, from all of that sort of being left in the open and then fought for later. And, you can't really renegotiate in hindsight very easily.
No, it's pretty hard to do. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak and distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift for you to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is, these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. So another question I think that young people might have coming out of school, maybe they're going to school right down the street from here, in fact, for recording and engineering and producing, and they're wanting to enter the world of the internship. As somebody who's got a beautiful studio now, you've had a beautiful studio before this, and you have a long history of interacting with interns. What advice do you have for students that are curious about, A, finding a studio to intern at, B, approaching it so that they get, possibly get the internship, and then C, once you got the internship, how do you proceed so that you have a really great experience with that?
Passion and inspiration on an interview go a long way. Hopefully your school, has a conduit and a list of studios and music makers that are actively participating in hosting internships. But once you get in the door,
you still got to send an email, right? You still got to do that first contact.
You got to do the resume thing, like everybody in the school will prep you for that. It's like, hey, put your work experience, put your DAWs together. What are you looking at and working on? I always try to find people that are in a lane that I can help. Like, interestingly enough, an internship isn't about free labor for the studio for taking garbage out and cleaning dishes. It really is about finding the next mix engineers in the world, or finding the next tracking engineers in the world, or editors, or, I think anytime I have an artist that is like, I just want to be, I'm going to take an internship because I want to be exposed to a high level of record making. It's like, well, the things you want to be exposed to are me in the room with an artist writing and producing. You can't necessarily always be. Sometimes there's a circle of trust, and there's privacy in those things.
Right.
And so the things that in an internship here, for example, that's very specific to here, is I mix a lot of records and I mix everything I produce. So this mix room is templated, and I have a mix assistant that's in here every morning prepping files, loading them into Pro Tools, setting up for me to come into the room to actually like do the mix. And then after I leave, they got to do TV mixes, they got to do instrumentals, they got to do acapellas. They've got to actually bounce out mix master bus stems to create an Atmos mix, take it into the Atmos room, set me up for an Atmos mix. So much to learn for a mix engineer to just shadow that. Be here at 8:30 in the morning every day, and you'll see not only how to set it up for me, but how it's delivered in the end. And every label has their own white papers for delivery specs, and that's a fast track. That's, if you're like a mix, like I want to be a mix engineer, that's what I want to do. Mm-hmm. That's a great internship for you. Just knowing that that's happening in this building on a pretty regular basis. I think if you want to implement that with lots of other things, cool. If you want to be an artist and you're like, I produce my own tracks and I write my own songs and I'm primarily interested in working on my own music, I would encourage you to make music.
Right.
I would encourage you to get in the room with other track producers and learn from them, and like go to all the pop nights if you're a pop artist, or go to the writing rounds if you're a country artist, or like start doing what it is that you want to do right away, and don't bother with being an intern in a recording studio.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you want to be an engineer, you really think you want to be an engineer, the really great ones, I mean the young ones. I'm not talking about boomers and old school people and stuff. I mean my 20-year-old, my 18-year-old interns that became mix assistants and full-time engineers that are my current engineers. I think the oldest one's 21 or 22, are building their own DIY gear. They know how to solder really well. They can signal flow trace stuff that is far, far beyond just like the patch bay. They've gotten deep into the modules. They know what certain tube principles and properties are. I didn't ask them to do that. Mm-hmm. Their compulsion, their passion, they're going down these rabbit holes themselves. They're getting into the sort of the deeper history of recording. They are falling in love with some vintage gear and some new gear. They're hanging around me while I'm checking out the new version of Melodyne to see if there's the new tool on the tool palette. What does that do? Let's learn that stuff together.
Did Melodyne finally update?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just kind of making shit up. That's probably not even out in the world. My point is the philosophy of these guys. I'm not creating a curriculum for them. They're finding things to do. You're on Music Row in Music City, full of amazing gear and musicians and things. Like, if you can't find something to do just by witnessing and being a seat at the table and then helping create a difference in that ecosystem on your own, without, like, anybody can do a checklist. I can make a checklist and you can burn through it and check it off and then leave. I don't know if you're necessarily growing. Like, come in and be kind of unassuming and be observant and find ways to better every environment. Try to understand every little ecosystem. In a building like this, there is a lot.
There's a lot of stuff to learn in this room.
There's a lot of stuff to learn. And some of it's what we just talked about, admin. Tammy up at the front is like filling out SAG-AFTRA forms for singers and AFM musician cards for musicians and sound exchange for me as a producer, and liaisoning with legal agreements as a production and things. Dealing with product endorsements and PR and publicity and podcasts and staying involved in the community and having a public face. There's so many facets to this, from Atmos mixing to 2 mixing to playing drums and bass and guitars and keys. Like, you know, um, if you lean towards having an affinity for guitars and you're an intern here, like, take it upon yourself to figure out how many guitar strings I have left in the inventory and find a burr in a fret and see if we can buff it out. And you know what I mean? Like, I don't know where everything is. I find problems all the time, but the really great interns I've had have come to me with, "Hey, are you aware that this is all happening? And here's the solution to all of it."
Yeah, that's really helpful.
It's like, "Oh, go ahead, do it." You know, these guys around me are bringing me solutions to problems I'm unaware of every day and making this an amazing environment. You know, it's hard for me to create a curriculum for people to be amazing. I can, you know, whatever's in my peripherals, I can make a to-do list.
You created an environment for people to be amazing.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, dude, this has been so awesome to be here with you in the studio like this for finally for a video interview too. What a beautiful, beautiful place. Rockstars, I highly encourage you to check out Addiction Studios and you know, go to the website.
Yeah, it's addictionsound.com, and then on Instagram we're just at addictionsound.
Okay, great. And then closing question for you.
Okay.
This one's hypothetical. You've answered it before, but it's been a minute and never on video. So we're going to take the Wayback Studio machine. You get to go back in time and find young version of David, and you go back and give yourself this bit of advice. You say, "I've come back to tell you this is the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day." What advice do you feel like going back and giving yourself if you could?
Buy real estate in Bitcoin. I don't know.
Believe it or not, that's probably not the first time we've gotten advice like that on this.
Yeah.
It can be good.
Yeah. You know, it's, you know, that's not financial advice for me or anything like that. You know, I don't want this to sound like a cop-out. I've been doing this longer than I can remember. I have a unique situation where I grew up literally doing this. Third generation. My grandfather was a saxophone player. My father was a bass player and a studio guy. We had a studio literally in the back of our house, our dwelling, up until I was like 5 or 6 years old. I was exposed to all of this, and I've been doing it and kind of keeping my head down. I don't have advice for myself because I don't know that I've really, it's interesting. This has all evolved into whatever it is, but it's the process has all been the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I figured it out along the way. You know, I'm grateful for the mistakes. So like part of the intimation is like, oh, avoid this because that's going to be a bad mistake and you're going to, no, the mistakes were probably the most important thing I ever had in my career. They kind of like rechanneled me. So like if any advice I could give myself could make me avoid the mistakes, I don't think I'd have any of this without the mistakes. So my advice would be keep your head down and find things you love, follow the passion. And when you feel like you don't believe in the thing and the music, eventually, when you get to that point, then just navigate towards that. But I did that, you know, I wouldn't want to cheat myself out of taking all the crummy work early. You know, it's like, it's easy to say, hey, if you don't believe in the music and it's like not part of your brand and imprint and you wouldn't be proud of it, don't work on it. And that's bullshit in the first 10 years. Take everything.
Right.
Say yes to everything you possibly can, which I did. I did tours with bands I didn't necessarily love. I played on lots of music that it wasn't really like in my wheelhouse. I made financial mistakes, all kinds of stuff. I think it's really, really important, you know? And then at some point you get to curate that experience. You're like, you know, I made those mistakes. I don't have to scrape my knees and bump my elbow on this again. I see that coming a mile away. Maybe I'll stay over here and work on a artist that's less known for less money, but the music's going to be amazing and we're going to make a record that I'm going to be proud of the rest of my life. Great. If you know, when you get to that point, that's the win. That's success. That's the definition of success. I don't care what that thing is, if it becomes a gold or platinum record or not. It literally is like the realization of all the mistakes, and then knowing you're going to make new mistakes unfortunately, as you go at this level, the mistakes you make are, more catastrophic,
Right.
And so I continue to make catastrophic mistakes, and I own up to everything that I've done, and I avoid it the next time through. And I just, I love all the music I'm making and the people I'm making it with. And that's maybe it would be nice if I could go back in the time machine to say, you'll get there. You know, just you got to,
keep the faith.
Say yes to everything. Don't get discouraged. I got discouraged, but not enough to quit or not to stop. I think you have to get to that point. You got to test your, what am I willing to do? Am I willing to do this or not?
Yeah.
You got to kind of hit rock bottom in a bunch of different places to sort of figure out what's important to you. Because this is the life you're living. It's got to be full of joy and passion and compulsion. You can't keep me in bed in the morning. I'm already I'm up before my alarm and I'm thinking of a million things on a song or a production or a guitar or something showing up at the studio today,
Yeah, I find that too when I get to do music in the studio. I'm so excited to go down and get right back to it.
What a gift. I'm still absolutely in awe, that I get to do this, every part of it. I get to wake up and drive in my car to Music Row in Music City and just walk into a room like this and play on all my favorite stuff all day until I'm so tired I can't keep my head up and go to bed. And people give me enough to buy groceries and support myself over and over again. I have no idea why. I don't know why the universe works that way. I'm just grateful.
Yeah. Well, dude, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us. It's a pleasure as always to hang out with you. Rockstars, thank you so much for watching and hanging out with us. Drop a comment in and let us know if you got any questions about any of this stuff. Let us know how you enjoyed it. And we'll jump in to do our best to answer that. And kick that subscribe button and the like button. If you enjoyed this video.
Yeah, and follow us on Instagram. Send me some DMs. Anybody's got any individual questions about this thing too, certainly put it on my radar. I'm happy to chat with anybody about anything.
Okay, awesome, dude. Thanks, man.
Okay.
Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this episode possible: iZotope, Native Instruments, Atom Audio, and SAE Institute. And remember to take advantage of our special coupon codes at iZotope.com and nativeinstruments.com. Use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plug-in purchase. And don't forget, you can start mixing right now with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in the show notes. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. Also, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel because it's a great way for you to help support this show. I'd also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for watching and listening, Rockstars. We'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.